A very good Sunday morning to you from the KTN News Center this Sunday. Many thanks for joining us. It is the 14th day of March 2021. Now, this past week, Kenyans marked 1 year of the COVID-19 global pandemic, and President Uhuru Kenyatta did address the nation on Friday, extending the raft of measures to try and curb spread of now a third strain of the COVID-19. One of those measures include banning of political gatherings for the next 30 days. We'll get into that. Also, this past week, Kenyans marking third anniversary of the handshake, the cooperation deal between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM party leader Raila Odinga. Have Kenyans realized the envisaged fruits of that handshake? We'll take a look at the hits and misses of the handshake 3 years on. In the meantime, we'll also look out into the upcoming Machakos senatorial by-election, which is set to happen on the 18th this coming week. Another battle of political interest, not just the people of Machakos electing their senator. We'll get into that. This is Inside Politics, Kenya's premier Sunday morning political broadcast, where we dissect the biggest political and policy issues in the Republic. Be sure to stand by for the next 120 minutes and talk to us at the tail end of the show. We'll also take a look at what's happening in our neighboring country, Tanzania, where the president, John Pombe Magufuli, has not appeared in public for days now. Just what is happening? My panelists are here with me, but before I go to them, let's go into the COVID-19 issues. And the country is looking at a new raft of COVID-19 measures, even with the onset of the coronavirus vaccination drive last week. President Kenyatta has banned political and social gatherings for a period of 30 days and extended the nationwide dusk to dawn curfew. Let's get more from KTN's George Maringa.
After much speculation and anticipation, President Uhuru Kenyatta finally emerged on the State House porch.
You can always revive an economy, but you cannot revive a lost life. If you take care of the people, they will take care eventually and revive our economy.
For starters, all forms of political gatherings are prohibited for the next 30 days.
The escalation or de-escalation of the containment measures in regard to the prohibition of political gatherings and social gatherings, dependent on whether the national endeavor to break the chain of transmission will have been achieved.
Fresh guidelines have been issued with regards to funerals. Funerals, cremations, and other interment ceremonies shall be conducted strictly within 72 hours of confirmation of death. Furthermore, attendees of funerals and such-like ceremonies shall be limited to the immediate family of the deceased, with the number capped at no more than 100 persons. The same capping extends to other social events. Attendees of weddings and other traditional unions and rites have also been capped at a maximum of 100 persons. In places of worship, only a maximum of 1/3 of the capacity of such places will be allowed at each session. To the one most Kenyans had waited for with bated breath, the nationwide dusk to dawn curfew has been extended for a further 60 days. Bars, restaurants, and other establishments open to the public must close by 9 p.m.
Tumefanya makosa kwa kusema tushirikiane.
It is not the first time that President Kenyatta is issuing a warning on political and social gatherings, with politicians finding a way around these protocols and holding political rallies. Will the ban work this time?
Yule ambaye atadhubutu kuvunja hiyo sheria, awe ni nani ama ni nani, ndio nasema mpaka mimi mwenyewe, awe ni nani ama ni nani, atashughulikiwa kulingana na sheria za taifa letu la Kenya.
The head of state was also quick to reassure Kenyans on the safety of the vaccine, whose rollout is already underway.
This vaccine has been tested, and our own medical experts are persuaded that it is that its safety profile is bankable.
So far, a total of 1,879 Kenyans have succumbed to coronavirus. 1 year into the pandemic and a raft of measures afterwards, President Uhuru Kenyatta maintains that his government will not let down its guard in ensuring the safety of its citizens. And with the rollout of the vaccines already underway, the battle towards the end of the pandemic may be so near yet so far. George Maringa, KTN News, Nairobi.
I'm joined in studio this morning by Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, as well as lawyer and political strategist Kipchumba Karori. Also joining us via way of Zoom is communication strategist Mark Bichachi, as well as governance expert Hesbon Owila. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining me. Let's get into it. Let me begin with you, Kipchumba. Are you satisfied? Were you expecting the president to issue these kind of measures, an extension to the curfew, a ban on political rallies, which has been in force before, but has not really been followed?
Thank you, Ben. When I sat down and went through the speech of the president, the only difference I saw was the change in date when it was issued. But all the things that he said have been there before, and whereas we all know that there's a third variant of the coronavirus in town, what we must ask ourselves from where we are currently are the issues outside things like curfew. Do we have the scientific research or any other study that has shown that curfew, the ban on night travel or night movement has enhanced the corona protocols? The other thing we need to ask ourselves is this: what is the end game of this? We are doing it for what? Things like the vaccination of COVID and other things, the rollout, we still at the uptake is very slow. Compare Kenya and Rwanda. Rwanda is doing pretty much better and faster than we are doing. And what I thought the president will come out and explain is that whereas the issue of COVID is so serious an issue, because as he said, you can bring back an economy that has collapsed, but you can't bring back the lives of those who have been consumed by the disease. What we need to ask ourselves going to the future is, one, the legality of the curfew. You cannot extend curfews in perpetuity without providing the science behind when you put security as a means of ending the coronavirus. There are so many other questions. The other question that comes into play is...
So you don't support the curfew extension?
I don't support the curfew extension because we do not have the science behind it. Secondly, there is a question that needs to be asked. We are having currently around 3 or 4 by-elections. Garissa, Juja, Ruriri, and Machakos. What happens to their political rights to gather, to campaign, and other things? Does the presidential decree overcome their constitutional political rights? Those are some of the questions we need to contextualize. The other question we need to ask ourselves moving into this thing is that, what are the health interventions that are needed, public health interventions that are needed over and above the regurgitated ones? Because at the end of the day, Ben, it is politicians, it is Uhuru Kenyatta. You will see him appear somewhere in downtown Nairobi atop a SUV, and a crowd will gather. From there, we will not understand what he means by a ban on political gathering. Right. The other thing, is it possible to ban political gatherings without turning it into a tanga-tanga kieleweke kind of skewed banning of political rallies?
Well, it's a good question. What do you think, Dismas? The president saying that the government is prioritizing life over the economy. What is your take on that, and also the ban on political rallies?
Well, I think what President Kenyatta said is the best thing to do as a nation, and as a head of state, is got the primary responsibility to secure and protect our lives and our properties. But we go back to the basics. As we celebrate, or rather, as we look at the 1 year after COVID got into Kenya, as the government clearly given us the critical success factors, that as we fight COVID, these are the milestones we are supposed to achieve, so that every Kenyan is alive to that. And in my view, both the Ministry of Health and the State House have not given us that clear picture, so that we know whether or not our fight is a success. We need to be given those critical success factors and a very clear path, so that we know whether or not it's a success. Then number two, it's the case that the people who break the regulations the president has issued, they start from State House itself, then you go to the office of the deputy president, you go to the cabinet ministers. So one wonders, again, whether we've got two sets of rules. That are, when it comes to COVID procedures, then the powerful politicians have got one set of rules, and then Tom, Dick, and Harry have got another set of rules. Because we've had these bans on political rallies, but guess who has been having super spreader events? It's these powerful politicians. And for them, the vaccination is in town. They'll be the first people to get the vaccination, or probably they've been vaccinated. And Pua Mura and Wanjiro are wallowing in, they've been exposed to this disease. And then the third issue raised by Kipchumba Karori about curfews. In my view, and according to studies all over the world, the curfew that we have in Kenya and indeed any other part of the world is not a public health response. It's simply the government wanting to minimize movement at night because they know that COVID has occasioned economic challenges, and it's very easy to get people attempting to go into crime. So the president...
It's a security measure.
It's a security measure, yes. So the president and his deputy and all these powerful politicians must lead by example. It's useless for them to come up with these protocols and procedures, and then before the ink dries, they're all over town floating the same regulations.
Hesbon Owila, are you convinced that politicians will adhere to this one and that the powers that be will enforce this one more efficiently?
I think that's the critical question to ask. That in the recent past, what we've seen is that politicians have operated outside the framework of the protocol that have been provided. They've actually had crowds that would make anyone believe that there is no COVID-19 in this country. And therefore, when the president makes that announcement, it becomes a very critical issue because it is pronounced by the president, and therefore it becomes an issue that has to be enforced by our security and law enforcement agencies. And what I'm looking at is a situation where politicians will be a lot more innovative in how they communicate to their supporters, especially the ones who are campaigning for the few by-elections that we have. But critical on this is the enforcement, that whatever politicians come up with, they need to stick to the guidelines, and there must be a way of enforcing, the decree by the president. But then coming back to whether we needed all this and the science behind it, the way Kipchumba puts it, I don't think we need any science behind what we know is real. Because to deal with COVID-19, we are going to use both health mitigative measures and non-pharmaceutical measures. And key among that is to find pharmaceutical measures that would stop the spread of the new variant of coronavirus, which is very critical when you look at it against the backdrop of the curfew. Because there are two things, and this is not pure science, this is just social science. We have a vaccine in town, and then you have a situation, the other side of the situation that Kenyans want, a situation where there is no curfew. The president has decided to hell with this curfew, let Kenyans go back to their normal lives. So that illusion that there is a vaccine in town, and then the rules have been relaxed, would actually throw us to a state of pell-mell. I mean, everyone will think that we are going back to normal, and people will behave like they were behaving before the coronavirus. And that is where the danger is. People are looking at what the curfew is doing.
So all this is necessary from where you sit?
All this is necessary, especially from a communication point of view, because then it runs into the public the sense that things are not yet back to normal. And therefore we just need to ensure that we don't throw caution to the wind until there is a sense at which the vaccine will have everything brought to a manageable level. And then you can start asking, if our pharmaceutical methods are working, is it possible to reduce the stringent measures of the non-pharmaceutical measures, which include the curfew? Then there we'll have a conversation. But I think it would be dangerous in terms of the community spread, just wish away the restrictions. It will make people lose their guard. And I think the spread of the virus will eventually overwhelm our health system, and the buck will again stop with the president, and Kenyans will start making a lot of noise.
All right. Mark Bichacha, this is coming even as the Ministry of Health announced that they have just slightly less than 10,000 people have been vaccinated so far. Are you satisfied with that pace? And also, what are your thoughts on the president's measures for COVID-19?
Ben, first, I would just like to pass my condolences to the people who've lost kin, family, and colleagues during this particular pandemic. I think we keep looking at numbers and forgetting behind those numbers are real people. And this, for me, has come home because I know more than 5 very close friends of mine who have COVID, half of them with very severe symptoms. There's a friend, 2 friends of mine who are hospitalized, one who's in ICU, a colleague of mine passed on. So for me, this is something that has come to become very close to my heart. And I'm not looking at curfews and things like that as a matter of political conjecture, but as a matter of life-saving messages and actions that need to be taken. That said, am I content with the slightly less than 10,000 people being immunized? Of course not. If Rwanda is capable of doing almost 200,000 people today as we speak, then definitely Kenya, with a bigger economy, a bigger health network, a bigger population, should be doing much better than this. So I expect that in coming days, Mutahi Kagwe and his team should really pull up their socks and realize that this is a life-saving activity that needs to be done with the quickest way, in the quickest way possible, and with a lot of urgency and speed. Now, I'd just like to bring a few facts to the fore, Ben, if you'd allow me. That number one, we're looking at a very infectious and more virulent version of this particular virus. The infection rate has risen. I think it's above 12%. The number of symptoms and the severity of symptoms has also increased. Also, the probability that someone will die when they catch this has also increased. However, we also need to take those facts against the backdrop of what this country is facing in terms of an economy. Our economy is struggling. This is just the reality of the issue. And therefore, whereas if you look at the medical facts, this is a better time to shut down than it was last year, but we do not simply have the economic muscle to be able to do so. That brings it down to a question of personal responsibility and how the government can showcase personal responsibility. Number one, our politicians, and I hope the president will hold himself, his deputy, and everyone else to his words, should take responsibility and face criminal consequence for holding super spreader events. But as a population, we are not innocent. If you walk into any bar today in Nairobi, you will find many patrons without any social distance, sitting very close to each other, ignoring COVID. Now, this may not be highlighted on TV as a political rally is, but the truth of the matter is this, that because of the many propagandas we've had, including saying that Tanzania didn't have any protocol, see how well it is doing, is what has led us down this rabbit hole. I think what we need to do is those of us who do not understand the science should keep quiet and let the scientists actually guide us out of this particular puzzle. I'll end by giving an example of the United States. Yes. In the United States, where people argued, states where they argued whether they should wear masks, whether they should have protocols, basically GOP states had higher infection rates and more deaths because of COVID. Now, do we want to argue with science, or would we rather obey science? And then we have enough time to play politics about things that matter less than life and death.
Thank you. We'll continue to keep an eye on that. The president saying that they have chosen, or the country is choosing life over the economy losing hundreds of millions of shillings in the past 1 year of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. Don't go too far. When we come back, we shall be talking about the hits and misses of the handshake after Kenyans marked third anniversary of the political cooperation deal between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. What are the fruits of the handshake? Do you feel them? Of course, that started with the 9-point agenda, having grown into the BBI process. We'll come to that next.
Thank you.